Alright, so what we're going to be working on today, you can just forgive some of the background noise. I have some 3D printers running. What I'm going to be working on today is a hammered copper bangle bracelet made from 6 gauge CDA 110 copper. You can get copper like this in rolls from jeweler supplies or metal supplies. I got this at it's either Lowe's or Home Depot, and you can get a roll like this for, I want to say $24. Can't remember exactly. So this is going to be a 2.5 inch diameter bangle, but it has to be hammered up to size, so I can't just cut it to that length. So 2.5 inches. I'm going to have to go a little short, say let's see, 0 out. Of course we work in millimeters. I'm going to bring it to 61.3 millimeters. So that means I need a calculator. Alright. So 61.3, and we're working with 6 gauge copper, which is 4.1 millimeters. So 4.1 plus 61.3, okay, times 3.14, which is pi, 205.3 millimeters. So we can't go up to that with these calipers. We're going to have to use a ruler, but 205.3 roughly. So how we arrived at that was I measured the diameter in millimeters that I wanted this to end up at. I added the thickness of the material to that number, and then I multiplied by pi, circle 3.14, and that'll give you the length that you need to cut this to arrive at that diameter. So we need a ruler. Okay, ruler. What did we say? 205.3. So, straighten this out a bit. Okay. 205.3. Straighten it out as well as we can. That will be, we'll just go to 205, and that will be 20.5 centimeters. So 20 will be 200 millimeters. So we'll mark our 205 millimeter mark there. And ruler down. Jeweler's saw. Line it up. Our mark. Start cutting. Try to be as flush or straight as you can be on that cut. That'll make it easier to get a properly flushed join on the next step. But now we are going to knock this thing round. Try to round the ends as well as you can. Don't worry about flattening the tip a little bit because you're going to hammer the heck out of it. So, of course, we're going to come up to here, somewhere here. That's good. Start rounding the ends up on the smaller part of the mandrel. That way when you go to form it up higher, it will more closely adhere to the curvature of the bangle mandrel, of the bracelet mandrel. Okay. You can see we're pretty close to where we need to be. Just doing a rough rounding in because you don't want to make a D shape with heavy gauge copper. It will cause a lot of stresses on the join when you go to round it up, so you don't want to totally flat D shape. I mean, you can bend it in a little bit, but I wouldn't go too flat because that really puts a lot of stress on the silver join when you go to round it up. So okay, that's about as flat as I would go. And now what I'm going to do is run the saw blade through the joint a few times to get it nice and flat. Well, flatter. And then what we will do is use a sandpaper trick to really flush the join. Need to make sure this is flatter, otherwise it's going to give me trouble. Flatter, and of course don't be afraid to use forming pliers to get that joint closer. keep running the saw blade through the join until you get it as close to flush as you can. Don't worry about getting it perfect at this stage. I'm going to do that one more time with the saw. That is pretty darn good. Okay, you could go with that if you wanted to. I mean, I would say you could go with that if it was sterling. Since it's copper, what I like to do is clamp the join. This is a pro-grade vise that I bought at a local everything store, and I 3D modeled and printed some soft jaws out of TPU material for it, so I can really tweak on things and not cause too much marring. So what I do is I cut some sandpaper strips, okay, and I clamp the piece, and this also works with copper rings to get a seamless join. You won't even see the silver solder line in a copper ring, or even in this, if you pass the sandpaper through the join on each side a few times, letting the spring tension put pressure on the sandpaper. So I'll show you. One on that side, flip it over, try to keep it in line. Two, and flip it back over. I'm going to do a few passes over here. Okay, flip it over the sandpaper and do a few passes on this side. Just sanding the top a little bit so I can see how the joint is. Looks good. So we're going to call that done. And we'll take it out. see if I can see light through any part of the join. Looks good, solid seam. Just for some security, I'm going to add a little more tension on it with the forming pliers. Okay, that will assure that when I hit it with the torch, it won't easily, it won't more easily come out of flush when I lose some of the spring tension through partial annealing, because it will become partially annealed during the soldering process, although you only want to focus on this joint. You don't want to heat the back of this bangle up. If you lose that spring tension, this joint will migrate, these two pieces will migrate away from each other, and you won't have a perfect seam. You don't want that. That's the opposite of what you want. Some heat blocks up here. That heat shield in. And I will probably prop this joint up this way. Get it close to the heat barrier. And these are going to reflect some of that heat back to the bangle. So that looks good. And what I want to do now is flux it. And again, I'm using Handy Flux, which is a paste flux. And I dilute it with water. Okay, and now we're going to use a piece of hard solder. I make this solder myself with brass and silver, but the 75% hard solder that you buy from places like Rio, it's fine. It'll hold up. So I'm gonna cut a pretty sizable piece, and that's actually probably too much. That's okay. Not a big deal. So I'm going to remount the bangle because I don't have 3 hands, and I'm going to open the joint. You see, that's way too thick. I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is flatten this solder out. You don't want too big of a gap on that seam when you go to solder it, because it gives it more of a chance to migrate as the two ends come together, and you don't want it migrating out of flush. So, okay, so here we go. Push it into the seam. Okay, that looks good. And apply flux rather liberally, because it's going to take a lot of heat, and you don't want your flux to burn up before it can do its job. Okay. We're flushed up. We're fluxed, and we're ready to hit it with the torch. Now, this is going to take a lot of heat. A lot of heat. Use a regular propane air pencil torch, like you could on a ring. You can't use the easy torch on this. You have to use, if you're going to use propane air or MAP air, you need one of these swirl flame torches. It mixes the air and it swirls it around into a swirl pattern and makes it hotter. The other types of gas or fuel air torches, they just don't get hot enough. So if you're going propane air, MAP air, then you need a swirl flame torch. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the torch on, and I'm just gonna focus on this joint below it and above it, and just alternate back and forth. As I said, I don't want to anneal this back because I'll lose spring tension and the joint will migrate and the silver will be more prominent. Solder flowed, the joints came together, and now it just goes in the pickle. I would actually wait a few minutes to put that in the pickle. It's pretty dang hot. So we'll put that in the pickle and we'll come back. So we're out of the pickle, and the joint didn't migrate that much, so that's good. We do have a little bit of excess solder to clean up. So what we're going to do is take a file and start that process. I hate filing. Try to avoid it as much as possible. Just deal with the top first. The filing will get you a good start, because what we're going to do next is hit it with the polishing wheels. So you don't want to have to so the next thing we're going to do, have most of the excess solder cleaned up. What we're going to do now is start our dust collection. We don't want to breathe abrasive dust. Eye protection, because you don't want abrasive dust being stuck to our eyeballs. That is never a good thing. Alright, so I'm going to take this polishing wheel. This is a medium glue wheel, high flex, and I'm going to just clean up the joint until there's no more silver showing. I ran out of storage on the camera that the microphone was attached to, so I'm just going to pick up from here. What I'm doing here is making sure that the surface of the bangle is buffed and polished before I actually start forging it and adding the hammer texture. It's important to do this because your final surface finish is only as good as what you start with. You're just going to be hammering dirt into it and oxidation and scratches and all that business. Make sure your hammer is highly polished, because once again, it's the final surface finish is only as good as your hammer that you're using to forge with. So make sure that the bangle is highly polished and your hammer is also highly polished before you start hammering. Now what I'm doing here is I'm going to be forging or hammering in 3 different planes. I'm going around the middle of the bangle first, as you can see here. And now I'm going to go more at like maybe a 45-degree angle on the side of the bangle. And now I'm going to flip it over and do that forging on the other side as well at probably a 45-degree angle or thereabouts. I do my hammering in 3 different planes to reflect the most light. If you just hammer in one plane or in one direction, then it's just going to look shiny and glinty in one direction. It won't really sparkle. And here I'm doing random hammer strikes to break up that pattern even more, and also just nudge it up that much more to the size that I want. Every time I strike with the hammer, I do it from a different angle at this final pass. Now I'm checking the inner diameter to make sure we're up to the correct size, which should be 2.5 inches. That's good enough for me. And now it's time for the final buff and polish. And you can't really see it here, but I'm kind of going around all the sides and edges first. And then I'll flip it over and get the actual facets. Now, the way I finish the inside is I just use 400 grit sandpaper on a split mandrel, and kind of give it that brushed finished look on the inside of the bangle. And there it is. And you can just use a copper polish to finish it off.